Hey everyone, John here from FatSex. Today I am super excited to have Taylor Kimball on the first video where I'm actually interviewing someone. So I got to know Taylor recently. He is an SEO and he has helped me out tremendously in recent months. And he's doing a lot of really cool SEO work on FatSex and I'm impressed so far. So I wanted to bring him on to the FatSex interview program, the inaugural episode, and we're going to chat about the latest in SEO, especially a lot of big changes happening in the last 6-9 months, as well as 2023, what he's doing for me, his approach to SEO, talk about some Google changes, and any other topics that come to mind. So you don't want to listen to me. Let's hear what Taylor has to say. So, hey, Taylor, welcome to the program. And why don't you start off introducing yourself with your SEO background?
Sure. Thanks a bunch, John. That was great. So my background, I live here in Chiang Mai, Thailand. It's the kind of the SEO capital of the world. If any of you are Matt Diggity YouTube subscribers, he just released a video, I guess, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, talking about why Chiang Mai is so popular. So I've been in Chiang Mai for about 4 years. And actually, I wasn't doing SEO when I came here. I didn't even know what it was. I was working online as an editor, and through my friendship with Kyle Roof and Matt, kind of got dragged kicking and screaming into SEO. You know, I can be a bit stubborn. So when everyone's doing one thing, I don't want to do it. And now here I am doing SEO full time. So yeah. Originally, I was doing SEO with Kyle Roof's agency, High Voltage, and then over time, I started taking private clients, and so now I primarily just work with consulting, and I have my own affiliate sites, and yeah, that's basically how I got started in SEO. That's my background. I'm lucky enough to call some of the best names in the business close friends. So I've really had a fortunate mentorship from people like Kyle Roof and Matt Diggity and Will Tribe, in terms of learning SEO and growing in it and just having access to, information and resources that really helped me speed along my development in the industry.
Oh, that's quite a background. I'll give you that. So, I've come to know Taylor a little bit in recent months, and he's helping me out with FatSex, and it's already making some improvements, which I'm really excited about, because FatSex never really been an SEO powerhouse, but it could be, and I'm definitely encouraged with what you've had to show me with a lot of really good opportunities. So why don't we kick off with what your main thrust in SEO, what you believe moves the needle the most when it comes to SEO? And perhaps you could restrict it to niche sites. A lot of people watching the FatSex program, their main business is publishing niche sites. Sure.
Well, I think that the big sort of like focus of 2022, 2023 was this like concept of topical authority. And I think niche sites are really like a perfect focal point for that strategy, where, I typically talk with clients and I say, like, think of your website like a book, right? If you're going to the library and you want to learn about dogs or something even more niche than that, like dog training, you're going to look for the book that covers everything in detail. That's the most comprehensive. If you're going through a table of contents in a book and you realize, hey, there's some chapters missing or some subjects that aren't covered, why would you choose that book over another, right? So for me, the topical authority play, which is basically becoming the authority on a topic, in a niche site is the perfect example of this. That's the strategy I like to take. Now, I don't think SEO works in isolation. So even though I typically take a content-first approach, I still think backlinks are important. Technical SEO is really important. It's not just write good content. I think the idea of like, just write good content is a very outdated concept that gets thrown around from people who don't do SEO. But the best approach you can take in this day and age is a topical authority approach, especially from a niche site, because all you need to do essentially is have the most comprehensive site on the internet, right? Now, there's more to it than that, but that sums up the approach I take, and that sums up the strategy I typically talk with and present to clients.
Yeah, I love that approach as well. I like it. For me, I like it. I'm not nearly as technical when it comes to this stuff as you, but I like it because it gives me a lot of control, right? I get to control. I can give myself the best odds of doing well by really covering topics really, really well and in depth. And that has worked for me over many years, and it's still working quite well. Now sort of a tangent on that, I think I think EAT is a fairly important aspect. I think that's definitely tied in with topical authority. We've talked about that, privately. Talk to me about ways of improving EAT. From what I've read, it's become important. I made a big push with that. FatSex actually does quite well, I think, in that department, especially when we're tying in with like knowledge graph and schema entities and EAT. What are your thoughts about that in terms of with the topical authority?
Yeah, so I actually think that EAT is going to become even more important than it was previously, especially with the advent of AI content. If you look at schema, right, we have like author schema, and then we also have fact check schema. So as AI content just sort of blows up over the internet, I can imagine that Google's going to put a lot more weight on the author attributes and then as well as the fact check attributes. So you may have a piece of AI content and Google says, okay, this is good, but if you're having fact check schema, say, especially if you're in a your money or life niche, a YMYL, your EAT is going to be much more important than, say, just something casual. So I think that's a good approach to take. And I think especially like yourself, you've established yourself in the industry, you've got the entity, you've got the knowledge graph, you've built out who you are. So for me, that's a very important path to take. Ways of raising EAT, one is sort of the, general knowledge, which is like, if you're a business, do a GMB, try to get an entity schema about yourself, or about your website, have your social profiles, show you're a real business, a real company, treat everything as if it's legitimate. And this is advice from Kyle Roof, which he said when we were talking about affiliate sites. It's like, don't treat your affiliate site as an affiliate site. Treat it as a real business, right? So do all the things that a real business would do, and Google will likely treat you a lot better, which I've seen is the case. And what that can look like is just having author bios, working with real people, getting their LinkedIn profiles linked at the bottom of your author boxes, and then establishing yourself and your site as an authority in the space. And from a content standpoint, tying back to topical authority, one thing AI content, even though it's flooding the internet, doesn't do well is it doesn't really cover new topics very well, right? Because it hasn't been trained on it, or it doesn't cover very niche topics. So from an EAT standpoint, one strategy I like to take, especially with niche site owners who know their industry extremely well, is for them to be looking for new content opportunities that other people just couldn't replicate without really being in that niche in depth, right? So that for me is another one, is like, what are the subjects that you can cover from a topical standpoint that unless you're actually an authority in this space or you're actually an expert in this space, you're just not going to know about, or you're not going to have the details to write about. So those are kind of two ways that I see doing EAT.
I love that. So are you saying looking for trending topics within a niche would be one approach to bolstering EAT in that way?
Sure. Trending topics, right? Things that are new in your industry, stuff that the AI hasn't been trained on yet. Or just, let's say that you are in a niche where it's well known, but you as an expert are likely going to have much deeper knowledge. Maybe you'll know like the technical terms or scientific terms or jargon and slang, or you're going to know more, niche facts or subjects or topics or questions that the people in that industry are going to care a lot about, but maybe they're not popular enough for, AIs to be trained on. So, AI will produce great content, but oftentimes it can be a bit surface level versus someone who's specialized in an industry or really knowledgeable can dive deep into it and talk a lot about it, and that will communicate through your writing. So that's the other approach I like to take. Not just trending, but really go in depth into sort of, the micro niches of your general niche as well.
Makes total sense. So you've mentioned AI, all right? So let's talk about rolling that into the process, because let's face it, a lot of people are. I am. And so one approach I like is taking that boutique approach, looking for those micro niche opportunities within a niche. And I'll be writing an article, and I definitely will write part of it. But then let's say you get to some parts where, AI could probably do a pretty good job, right?
Sure.
Just a part of the article. Is that a way to roll AI into, make really great content with AI, but also myself writing part of it and from a unique angle within the niche? Is that, you think, a way to use AI effectively right now?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a huge fan. I actually have a course all about using AI for content and SEO on Internet Marketing Gold, the platform from Kyle Roof. And that's basically the strategy that I talk about, right? Is for me, and it's only gotten better. The course is about a year old now where we're looking at GPT-3, but with GPT-4 and all the sort of like upgrades that are coming out around it, I think AI can really replace the first draft of a piece of content, especially if you are outsourcing your writers, to non-native speakers or bilingual speakers. Many times the AI just does a better job on a whole, and then it can come back to your editor or to you and you fine tune, right? So then you add in the details, you add in the specifics, you add in things that the AI just wouldn't know. And I love this approach, right? You do need to do fact checking. I still like working with editors, and there's some topics where I'm just like, this isn't a good topic for AI to write. But on a whole, the technology is just improving like so much faster than anyone had anticipated, and the quality of the content coming out when you learn to work with the tool, especially something like ChatGPT, which gives you a lot more flexibility than sort of the older tools like Jasper. I think it's amazing. So, I definitely recommend incorporating it as much as possible into your content workflow without abusing it. I don't advocate like create and publish. I advocate treat it as a first draft. You would never publish a first draft online and then make it your own from there. But just the amount of time and effort that it cuts down on, and the ability to scale with a much smaller team, I think are just two benefits of AI that if you're not using it, you should really consider and look into.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love it in terms of not only does it speed up content production that I'm producing, but I actually get a lot of really good ideas in terms of, I ask it a question about something and it mentions something. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't know that. Let's explore that. And it makes the article actually better than it would have been had I just written it myself. So I'm finding tons of really great uses with it.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones as well. Is so with the idea of like topical authority, right, and topical maps. I've played with this a lot. Like, how do we use AI to generate topical maps? It doesn't know what a topical map is. When you ask it, it talks about like a topical map of geography. So what you have to do when you're working with the AI is figure out what does it know. So often I'll write a prompt that says something like, I'm writing a book on this subject. Create me a table of contents that covers all the topics and subtopics that need to be in this book to be the most comprehensive. And then many times it gives me a really nice list of topics, and I can kind of just repeat that, and break it down further to the point that I'm getting topics for pieces of content that I didn't even think about. And as you said, that's just a really nice sort of brainstorming tool where you can just quickly bang out 50, 60 articles that have nice, catchy, names. And you can ask the AI too, like, okay, take these 50 topics and now write a catchy blog post article and you're ready to go. So yeah, I think all around, like, if you treat it as a second brain in a way, you can really leverage it in a powerful method.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of catchy, it's also really good, especially at least GPT-4, coming up with titles. Much better than me. I'm not much of a copywriter in that regard, so I'm using it for that purpose, like daily.
Same. I always ask it like, you're an expert copywriter. Here's my email, or here's my, here's the title of my article or whatever. Reformat this to the best practices for copywriting and advertising, and boom, off it goes.
Nice, I love it. All right, so AI good for content. But you definitely want it edited and, I guess, controlled or produced with you heavily involved. So, and I agree with that. Now, let's talk about Google rolling out. Is it Maggie, Magei, new search engine rolling out? I mean, we got Bing's new chat search engine.
Yeah.
And I'm sure lots of people are using it. I can't say I've seen any significant decrease in search traffic since that rolled out. So that's good. Let's talk about what your thoughts about Maggie rolling out and basically an entirely new search interface from Google. What are your thoughts?
I like the idea. I'm curious to see when it will roll out. It kind of feels like Google's been lagging behind in this AI development on a whole, right? Like to imagine, I mean, if you asked me like 2 years ago, hey, who's going to release like AI integration first, Google or Bing? I would have been like, well, of course Google, right? There's no way Bing is going to be the top players in the space, but they've done it. So for me, in many ways, it feels like Google's just trying to catch up and be like, hey, we're still relevant. And obviously they are, right? They're still the biggest search engine on the planet. But I will be curious to see, like, when do they actually roll this out? So it's a nice announcement, but when is it coming to fruition? They like BART is coming out, but there's still issues with it. So I think it's like it's pending and it will be here. But the real question for me is like, what's the legitimate timeline on it? You know, when will it roll out on a wide scale? And more importantly, just because it rolls out, will people actually adopt it? Google's released a lot of products in the past that they just don't take off. Like I mean, I use Google Lens, I don't know, once or twice a month. I thought I'd use it a bunch. I was like, oh, Google Lens is an amazing idea. And then it just never really took off for me. And I think a lot of people feel that way. So Maggie will be interesting, especially if it does take off and, you know, people don't really click through to sites. I think the biggest sort of orange to red flags for me when I read through their announcement was this concept that like directly on the search page, they're going to have product selections. They're going to have the informational content. And then when they talk about monetization, they're saying like, oh, we'll do display ads underneath the content. And that's how Google will still make money. You know, so for me, being in the affiliate space and working with people in the display ad space, that is the question and concern is like, well, what happens to those of us who monetize our websites? If Google removes the ability for people to, require people to go to a website, that can be a bit of a concern for sure.
Well, I think that's the big question. I've been asked from some people, you know, is there a future with niche sites, affiliate sites, sites generally, local sites, local business sites? And, you know, I've given a lot of thought. First off, you know, the whole world's heard of Bing and its chat, and no doubt millions and tens of millions of people have visited using it. I haven't seen a decrease in visitors from Google. So it's not like basically 80% of the world has switched to Bing. Right. And Bing's chat's pretty good. Yeah. So, you know, that's good news for me. I also think, you know, we've had Google snippets for years, right? And as a Google user, I like them. I use them for really simple stuff. If it's a one sentence response that I'm looking for, it's worked great. I won't click into sites, right? So that definitely impacted certain types of sites over the years. I mean, that's no question. Dictionaries, I don't know who goes to a dictionary website anymore.
Weather, things that I don't actually need to know more than that one sentence, as you said.
Exactly. So that's been around, and chat's going to do a great job at that. As long as it speeds up. I mean, the snippets have always been so nice because it's instant, right? And then I do actually like those people also ask things. I kind of just almost out of interest sake than anything else. Yeah. But, you know, people have still visited websites despite pretty extensive snippets and information being displayed. So my thoughts are probably going to see a reduction in traffic along the lines of the types of queries that snippets have basically gobbled up already. But I think anything in depth, the traffic is still going to be fine. I mean, those are my preliminary thoughts. And before, you know, when Bing actually rolled out chat, I didn't really know, right? I mean, I didn't really know, but I would think that, like, if that was the be all and end all, that would be it. Nobody would be using Google now because I mean, everybody's heard of it. My parents have heard of it. Everybody's heard of it, right? Like, sure. They're not big web users, right? But it's out there. So anyway, I think that's been an interesting development. And I bring this up, I should preface that I don't have a crystal ball. You know, of course. I'm speculating. I'm going on the information we have so far. And, you know, I remain optimistic with the types of sites. And that said, I do work toward diversifying traffic currently, a little bit harder than I have in the past. Yeah. I definitely not doing quite as many of very simple Q&A type articles that have worked wonderfully for the last number of years, but I don't really do as much of that. I'm really going more into the type of content you've basically been talking about much of this interview. And I think there's a strong future for that.
Yeah. You know, and I think to drive back to like the question that you have people asking you, is it worth doing a niche site? In my opinion, like 100%. You know, if you have an idea for one, you should start it now, especially with AI on your side, right? In some ways, it's never been easier to launch a website and to build one. In other ways, it's never been harder because everybody now knows how to do it. But, you know, like there's so many good resources online. Your course, there's other courses floating around. You know, if you want to go the affiliate route, you've got Matt's course. Like the people who are successful are teaching you. And they are also concerned about these things. So for sure, you know, if Google made a huge update, I can imagine you're going to release a video in your course to your students to say, here's what we do. So you should still start a niche site. And as you said, you know, rich snippets are there. People still click to websites. I mean, beyond the technology, there's also the user adoption. So even if Google releases that, right? Like I looked at Bing and I thought this is really cool, but I still use Google every day. So there's the user's habits as well. You know, I have friends whose like parents and grandparents are on Bing because that's just the default on the computer. So I do think this is something that will come, and maybe from the much younger generation. You know, they may not even be using search engines. I know here in Thailand, Google's not that popular. People typically like look for marketplace and information on platforms like Twitter and Instagram. I have friends who do all their shopping on Instagram. So it may change, right? But I think we're looking much further down the line than say, you know, should I bother starting my niche site and have it run for 2-3 years? So I think people should go for it. And, you know, the space will always adopt and change one way or another. And there's thought leaders like yourself and Matt who know how to adjust as things happen.
100%. I've had to pivot many times, and that's just any business you own, you're going to do it. I mean, it's just the way it is, especially with technology as it is.
Yep.
The last topic I want to cover is you and I have discussed this before, and this is actually really what got me interested in working with you, is you've recovered some sites very, very successfully from penalties. Can you talk about that? Well, basically, what's the magic bullet there, if there is one?
Yeah, I unfortunately I think that's people like to think that there's a magic bullet on recovery, right? Now we're not talking about manual penalties. We're talking about algorithmic penalties. So, you know, let's say you have a niche site, you have an affiliate site, it's doing well, and then suddenly traffic is just dropping off and going lower and lower, and maybe you sort of like baseline, you know. So a specific case I'm thinking about, we're getting about 30,000 visitors a month, and then they basically had a traffic drop off over about 6 months' time, and I believe it was the 2022 May update that kind of took a plunge till they were getting just about like 100 visitors a day, right? So it's a big drop off, but it's algorithmic, and that's in some ways easier and harder to recover from because Google hasn't looked at your site and said like, hey, you have a serious problem, which means you just need to figure out what's wrong and fix it. But the timeline is longer. So in a case like that, typically what I'm looking for is any major red flags. Now, you know, do you have technical issues? Did you change something that would have caused your site to either A, get maybe blocked by robots, get de-indexed? Do you have a site speed issue? What's going on there? So first is always like, look at the technical foundation, see if there's a quick fix we can get into. But in many cases for me, when I see sites that have been hit by algorithm penalties, it's often quite similar causes. So, you know, with the helpful content update, a lot of times, most recently, I'll look and it's like, okay, you have a money to info content ratio problem. You know, I'll go to their site and it's like 80% of your pages are all like best pages or review pages or product pages. And this just isn't within Google's guidelines of what they see as a useful site. So for what I went to and I said like, hey, first off, you have tons of orphan pages. You're mostly money pages, you know, and your site just needs like reorganization and improvements in speed. And that was it. So we essentially just went hard on him writing more content, covering topics. So say, you know, you focus on this topic and then this one and this one. Doing actually a lot of people also ask and catching featured snippets as well. And it only took about 3 months, right? So I normally tell people, however long your site has taken to decline, give yourself that timeline to recover. So most site recoveries are not instant. People want them to be because they're, you know, losing income, they're hemorrhaging money. But in reality, it's like if it took you 6 months of time to lose your traffic, give yourself 6 months to recover. With the idea being the goal is to have your site in the best position possible for the next core update. Because in my experience, that's really where we see the most growth. And with this site specifically, you know, it was sort of just trudging along and slowly getting better. And then I believe it was the September update last year, he just took off in a vertical graph, right? And now he's basically recovered to where he was before the drop. But he did put a lot of work in to fix that. So there isn't a silver bullet to be like, this is what you do. This is how you fix it. In reality, it's just diving deep and saying, okay, where are the issues that I need to fix? How do I present a good site to Google? And a lot of times it's not complex, but it is time and labor intensive.
Yeah, no doubt. Anyways, that's fantastic. And, you know, we're working together on FatSex. Already had a nice bump, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
So you're also willing to help out some FatSex members. We're together rolling out a coaching program fairly soon here, which I'm very excited about because I get asked about it a lot of time. I just don't have the time to dedicate to it. And, you know, at the end of the day, I've noticed, because I've done a fair number of one-on-ones with people years past, and a lot of people really want the real technical know-how when it comes to SEO.
Sure.
And that's never been my thing, right? My thing is I'm really a publisher. And I've run into technical SEO issues, and I've had to consult other people because that's not what I do. And so I know that that's what people want. They want, you know, especially dealing with recoveries or any technical SEO issues or plateaus where they need to just sort of break out. And so I'm excited to have you going to basically help run and do consults with FatSex readers who are interested in getting that in-depth, really one-on-one boutique help with their SEO. So, you know, we've talked, we put together a program. So just discuss briefly how this is going to work, how you're going to work with FatSex readers to be able to help them out.
Sure. So basically what we're offering is a couple of different versions of the program, right? So the first off is just going to be a one-off consultation. If you have a site and you know you're confident with it and you're really just like, hey, I have one or two sort of like in-depth questions or focus areas of SEO that I want to know more of, and that could be anything from like, hey, can you just review my content strategy and my current SEO strategy? Where do we go from here? To something like, you know, I've been doing this myself and I want to hire a team of writers. How do I find writers? How do I scale? How do I work with them? So the one-off consults are really going to be more like you have something you want to focus on for roughly an hour to an hour and a half, and you and I will get on a call. We'll review your site. I'll do some research. We'll dive in depth, and then basically we'll build out a plan to cover that focal point and to help you improve in those areas. Beyond just a one-off consultation, we are doing like basically a monthly coaching program where we'll have 2 calls a month and unlimited email access. So this is better if you are implementing an SEO strategy over time, or you want help with that, or you just have a few things on your site where you're like, hey, I want to learn a lot more about, you know, building a successful backlink campaign and on-page SEO, and I want a guide there for that time period, right? And then beyond that, if you're already doing really well, we're offering a done with you service where it's essentially a retainer model. So it's a per month basis, kind of like a subscription, where I will work with you on anything that you need. You know, so if you're like, hey, I have some pages I want optimized, or I need keyword research. This one's best for people who have like a team in house where they've got their writers, they've got devs, but they don't need or want to hire a full-time SEO as part of their team, you know, continuously. So if you're sort of revamping or you're doing a content sprint and you're like, hey, I'd like to have an SEO expert on hand for, you know, the next 2 months while we build this out, but then I don't need help, that's what I'm here for. So those are the 3 things I'm offering. You know, there'll be a lot more information coming soon around the details of that, but I love working with new sites. You know, that's for me the fastest way to grow as an SEO is to see different sites in different niches, find the problems that they have, and learn to fix them. You know, and oftentimes there's a lot of commonalities, but it's also the way I've managed to grow my knowledge in the industry so fast is by working with people and client sites and just seeing what's out there.
Fantastic. I'm really excited that you're also going to, I mean, it's basically like you're rolling up your sleeves, diving in,
yeah.
Which is something that I insist on because that's what people need. And it's particularly with keyword research is so huge because I get asked, that's probably the most common email I get is, what keyword should I go for, right? And it's a complicated question. It requires a lot of rolling up your sleeves. And you're willing to do keyword research and help people with keyword research. And that's huge. That's going to be huge. I'm very happy about that. So thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Any last words, comments you have about current SEO environment or anything else?
You know, I think just like the rate of change is going to just continue to increase in terms of like the tech we see, the way users interact with websites, the digital landscape. But I would encourage anyone who's thinking about starting a website, like it's an asset, right? It's a digital asset that you have. Whether you sell it or flip it, whether you keep it, you know, maybe you build it into a big brand. You just don't know what will come from the things you start and build. So, I mean, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine when you made your first niche site, you never thought you'd grow to where you are today. But imagine if you just hadn't done that out of fear of like, oh, well, what if sites, what if Google stops ranking niche sites? So I would encourage people, just, if you're thinking about it, do it, right? Like, SEO will always change, but people will always look for information. And once you're in the industry and you have an asset that you've built, you can pivot as you need, whether that means to social media, whether that means to a branded approach. It's out there. But, the world is in many ways more unstable for jobs market and income. That why wouldn't you want to invest in yourself and in your life and build your own projects?
Well said. Thanks very much for coming on today, Taylor. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, John. It's been great. Looking forward to working with you and with the FatSex community.
Me too.